Hello, Photo Op listeners. I'm Ben Lucas.
And I'm Stuart Marlantis.
And welcome to Photo Op, the podcast show where we talk about all things photo and video. So, what are we talking about today, Stuart?
We are talking about physical space.
Noise.
Specifically, kind of where we're sitting right now, home studios.
Home studios. Love it. All right. So, yeah, today we're going to walk through some of the essentials you need if you're setting up a home studio. So, I know that there have been a bajillion different things out there, and they're like, well, if you have a home studio, you need to have this camera and these lenses, and you need to buy these 14 different brands of like baby props. And no, you really don't. So, kind of regardless of what kind of photography you do, these are the things that we think you should have in your studio. Now, if you do equestrian photography and you don't need a studio, that's completely different. But we're assuming you do some sort of filming in your studio. So we're going to talk about the bare necessities to get you up and running. This assumes you have a camera.
Yes.
This assumes that you have, lighting, I assume.
Yeah. And we'll give you a little bit of both. We'll give you some physical stuff and we'll give you some...
how to set up your space.
Yep, I was going to say philosophical. Physical and philosophical.
And actually, for those of you listening to this in podcast form, thank you so much. You guys are amazing. But if you're watching this on YouTube, the space that we're in right now, were I to zoom out the camera just a little bit, you could see this space is currently a mess. And because I'm currently in the throes of organizing it and getting all of the organization, the wall behind me needs another coat of paint. And then there's going to be some artwork up there coming to you very, very soon. Next couple of weeks. So we're a few episodes away from you get some pretty artwork behind your head. Now I'm going to get some pretty artwork too. It's great. We're getting pretty close to that. There's also a lot of areas where I just need to drill hooks into the concrete, and that takes commitment. I'm married. I bought a house, but I don't know if I'm ready for that level of commitment,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, having just recently bought a house, like you're like, I really need to drill a hole in the wall.
But dude, yours is drywall, mine's concrete.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's scary. Anyway, regardless. So today we are talking about the must-haves for your home studio, but in this season, we're trying to start every single question or every single episode with a listener question. So I have a listener question for you today.
Cool.
This question comes from Allie. Thank you so much, Allie. Allie says, I keep wondering this question. Do some people like black and white photos, or is it just a photographer thing?
Just a photographer thing? It's an Instagram thing. That's the answer. Is it just a photographer thing? So I feel like yes and no, which is totally unhelpful. No, it's not just a photographer thing. I mean, black and white photography has existed for longer than color photography. It was the first photography. So no, and also like people will often, shoot because they like the style of black and white. They like the contrastiness of black and white. You can push black and white in ways that you can't push color, ways that start to look kind of weird. There's a lot of interesting choices that you can make with black and white that you can't necessarily make with color. So for that reason, not even just photographers, I think, screw around with that. I feel like often people will request that, especially for like weddings. That seems like a very common thing, even to this day. That's something that people ask for. So I would say photographers tend to play around with that more, certainly. But it's just something to experiment with. I don't think it's only a photographer thing, in my opinion.
I have 3 quick thoughts on this one. One is back in art school. The joke is if you take a terrible photo, turn it black and white and call it art.
Yeah.
Because if your white balance is off, black and white. Is it grainy? Black and white. Now it looks like film. Like, did you expose it poorly? Black and white. Did you blow out your highlights? Black and white. Like,
cool.
Black and white, it just kind of covers a multitude of sins, and then you're like, good enough. And every once in a while, I will shoot a photo at a wedding that was just so spur of the moment, candid, and turned out to be horribly exposed that I'm like, the only way to save this is black and white. Like, that happens.
I mean, it works.
But rare occasion. More often than not, though, I feel like there are some photos or moments that lend themselves to black and white and some photos that don't. So ask yourself, does color add anything to this photo? Because if the color doesn't add anything to the photo, then maybe black and white is a better option.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of silhouette shots where it's just kind of like shapes and I make those black and white because there's no interest in the color. Like if you have like a cool lens flare and you're getting like some kind of duotone, like that's one thing, but I just kind of have this white yellow line and I'm like, nah, black and white. Otherwise, yeah, there are things that you can do with black and white that you can't do with color, like you said. But the third thing I'll say is I really hate it when photographers say, here's your gallery, here's all 800 photos in color, here's all same 800 photos in black and white. Those black and whites are not going to be the best black and white that could possibly be because every photo is so individualized of like, you have orange on your sweatshirt right now. When you turn it black and white, do you want to turn that to a medium muddy gray or do you want it to turn it dark or like a red usually turns into a dark or do you want to turn it bright so it contrasts with the black on your sweatshirt? Like these are decisions you can make as a photographer. And when you click auto, sorry, we had a car backfire, so I'm going to try and finish that thought, and it might not line up. But as I was saying, the orange and black on your sweatshirt, they you can choose what tone you want that orange to be, whether you want it to blend in or whether you want it to contrast. And when you just auto black and white, it turns into this gross mud, and then it just looks bad. So don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, black and white's a stylistic choice. Like you need to not only choose to make it black and white, but choose to edit it as a black and white photo. It's not just something where you're like, oh, let me just, take all of the color out of this photo and then just leave it. Like it's a choice. You need to make an active choice to make it a black and white photo.
Have we done an episode of Should It Be in Black and White? Have we done that?
I don't think we have.
We're adding that to the list now.
But yeah, so I don't think it's long story short, I don't think it's only a photographer thing. But certainly that's where you find the most experimentation in black and white because those are the people taking the photos. I mean, the only other thing you see is just people with iPhones, I guess, snapping photos and then turning them black and white, which is hard to call real black and white photography. I mean, if you really want to go totally nuts.
I hate black and white photography. That's right. It's controversial. Put your hate comments down there. Comments are comments. So bring it on.
If you, I would say the only version of black and white photography that is a photographer thing is film black and white photography. I think that it's firmly a photographer thing that there is
hipster.
No real market for.
None. All right.
There you go. Thanks, Allie, for listening and for sending in your questions. For anybody else, hit us up at hello@photo-op.show.
Excellent. So on with today's episode, we're going to talk about some of the must-haves for your home studio. So it's funny, as we were prepping this list, I prepped, these are physical items you should have. And Stuart
prepped philosophical items that you should have.
Yeah, so Stuart's is more about what is the space?
We'll go back and forth.
What are the things we'll have? I kind of feel like let's just do a 2-part episode. Let's talk about the things, and if you have things to add, throw them in, and then we'll talk about the space.
All right.
And if I have things to add, I'll throw them in. Sound good?
Cool.
Excellent. All right. So at the top of this episode, we were talking about this is assumed. You have lights, you have cameras, you have lenses, you have, what have you. That really depends kind of on your style. If you do video, obviously it's going to be a constant light. If you do, I prefer flash, but there are photographers like Peter Hurley that just shoot continuous light because that's what they like. That's their style. Yeah. So you should have whatever lighting it is that you like. You should also have the modifiers that go with that lighting. So with Peter Hurley, he's got the barn doors for his big Kino flows. There are umbrellas and octabanks. And when you're just getting started, umbrellas are nice, but they carpet bomb light. They don't have a lot of control. I would say get a large, but not like ridiculously large. When I bought Pulsey Buff stuff, I don't know if I'd buy that still today, but I'm already invested. Yeah. That might be a thing for a future episode. But when I bought Pulsey Buff, I just started with 2 medium-sized softboxes.
What's medium-sized?
That's what they call it. It was medium-sized. Okay. They had a small, medium, large.
All right.
Medium. So I want to say it's like 30 inches,
Yeah.
36 inches,
That sounds
something
about
like that. Because the small one, it was like 24 inches. And I'm like, that's a travel softbox. And the
Yep.
big one was like, oh, that's too big for my studio. Like, I don't physically have the space for that.
How great would it be to have like one of those like 11 or 12-foot ones? They're huge ones.
I have a 7-foot umbrella.
There you go.
That does the same thing. That's neat. That's not a thing you need though. No, just getting some modifiers that kind of help you control that light. We're not going to get too into it because I feel like we could just rabbit hole down what's the best light for the next hour.
Yeah, and maybe it's maybe that's another episode idea that like
We're coming up with so many episodes.
How do you start out with lighting modifiers or lighting in general?
But I wanted to run through some of the other things. So I have a few things here. First is gaff tape. You use this for everything.
You will use this outside your studio.
Yeah. You use it to tape down a thing that shouldn't move. You use it to tape down cords so people don't trip on them. You use it to label things. What else do you use it for?
Oh, literally everything. You use it to fix stuff when it breaks in the field and you're like gritting your teeth and you're really mad, but you can kind of get it stuck together and working.
The old joke about duct tape fixing everything? Don't use duct tape. Duct tape sucks. It is terrible. Even Adam Savage hates duct tape.
Yep.
Boom. There you go. Gaff tape is just as good, but doesn't leave residue. Unless you are literally working with ducts, air ducts, don't use duct tape. That's not what it's for. So
also making mounts. That's the other big thing I do with it. like if you, there's always something where you're trying to rig something and you just don't have the right, you don't have the right clamp or arm or whatever. And like gaff tape can solve that. It can attach anything to anything. Is it going to look good? No. Will it probably get the shot? Yeah,
probably.
Most likely.
Probably. Speaking of clamps, let's go through some of the clamps that I got here. So I have a variety at my desk. You've got some of your basic ones. This one's got the little flat feet. What is this called? Because this one's an A clamp.
Yeah.
And then you've got whatever this guy is, which is
for the audio listeners out there. It's just like a plastic clamp that you'd find at any like
dollar store.
I got Harbor
this
Freight.
I got this at Lowe's for like an 8-pack of them. Whatever.
It's just those standard plastic.
Yeah, those
clamps.
little small plastic clamps. I use this for everything. You're always needing to clamp something.
Yep.
Sometimes when I put a reflector, I set a reflector up and it wants to fall over. You just put a clamp on the bottom of your reflector and now it will actually sit on your desk or your shooting space. Let's see, what else do I have down here? Super clamps.
Super clamps.
So many super clamps. So super clamps have two different attachments on the end that you can turn the knob. One is the knob that looks like any other knob. The other is the ratchet handle. Here's a ratchet handle one. And the ratchet handle one is nice because you can kind of pull it out and change it. So if it gets in the way of one of your items, you can kind of reset where that handle knob.
Or if it's up against a wall, it's great for that. Yeah.
So you can ratchet it down and then kind of keep on tightening it until you get it to where you need to. These are both the same clamp. The only difference is the handle, and this particular one has another attachment knuckle on it. So I love Avengers stuff because it's just really well made. This one is the Avenger D230, but it is just a very standard knuckle that you can then put boom poles. But the other thing too is if you unclamp it, it's got a big flat area. You can still put flags, gobos, scrims, anything you want in these. I have so many of these. I have another one that is particularly for flags and stuff.
Yes.
This one is a Mathelini clamp. So this one, you unscrew it, and it's got a big kind of flat, grippy. Feel that grip right
it's like
there.
Sandpaper almost.
Yeah. So this is going to hold anything you put in there, and you clamp it down, and then now you can get that big flat piece of reflector board or what have you. These are also great. Those pop-up backgrounds, like we have like a 5x7 or any of the small reflectors. You just jam the little rim of your pop-up inside this guy, and then it can hold it pretty good at almost any angle.
Sweet.
So that's a nice one.
Much better than those ones that often it comes with a stand where it's this little spring-loaded clip.
I do have a few of those,
Yeah.
but unless they are hanging straight down, they're not good.
Not
they're,
so good.
They're great for travel when I need it in a pinch, and
Oh, yeah,
that
they're
one's
small and
big
light.
and heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But in the studio, I don't use it that
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Here's another version of that same clamp that I showed you. It is, for those of you listening, we've got kind of the knuckle on the side where you can put your crossbars or your boom poles. This just kind of has a bigger, beefier handle, and these things are rugged. They're generally about $50 to $100 a piece.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
So they're not cheap to kit out with all of these, but you generally get one anytime you buy a C-stand kit. So you're not going to hopefully run out. The last two, when it comes to clamps and stuff that I'm going to share. This one is I believe this is called a mini ball knuckle. And it's basically just a ball joint with a ratchet handle. But I love putting this on anything because when you attach it to a stand, you unscrew it and now you can position your light freely and then lock it down as long as you have a free hand. So it's a little bit harder to get into position, but it's also a little bit easier to get in position because you can freely move the thing and then lock it down versus something else you need to... Oh, let me move this joint. Let me move this joint. When you're locked down and every ratchet or handle only moves one axis, now you have to move three things instead of one thing to get the position you want.
I have one of these too. They are so handy. Ball mounts can often be something that, at least me personally, I've sort of avoided a lot of them because it feels like, oh, well, this is something that's not going to hold. Like I'm going to put something heavy on it and then it's going to slowly sag. Those ball mounts are big and beefy, and when you hold one, you feel the weight and they stay where you put them.
That ball mount cost me $70, $80,
Yeah, that
something
sounds
like
about
that,
right.
a while back. And then this is just a super clamp, but this is actually a Tether Tools item that's literally just a bar with a slight uptick. And this is great because you can attach it to a stand and you can throw cables or cords or gaff tape. And I just generally have this one attached to anything I'm doing when I'm in the studio because I'm almost always needing to hang something, whether it's throwing my camera on here, hanging it by the strap, or throwing in gaff tape or a tether cable or something. Just having an extra little attachment point is just nice to have, really.
Sure. I don't have one of those. I'm not fancy enough.
There's also like J hooks that serve the same purpose. I know you've got some J hooks. Any other little clamps or attachments you can think of that are absolute must-haves?
Boy, that pretty much covers it.
I ran the full gamut.
I would say, I would say that, that pretty much fits. That's pretty much what I got too. I mean, I've got A clamps. I've got the plastic clamps. Yeah, I got a number of those. So
the next thing I would have on my list is when you're shooting in studio, safety first, always have sandbags. I've got a whole plethora of sandbags. I have roughly 600 pounds-ish in sandbags. But I wanted to point out two different ones that I have here. So this first sandbag, both of these sandbags are 5 pounds, but one of them is significantly larger than the other one. The difference is the larger one is sand.
Yep.
So the upside to this is that it is a lot cheaper. This is roughly half to a third of the price of a steel shot bag. But the downside is that it is significantly larger if space is an issue, and it is prone to mold if it gets wet.
Yes,
so don't do that. This one is a steel shot, and it's got this nice grip on the back so that it will actually kind of stay even when the thing's angled. It's a lot smaller, but it is still 5 pounds. So this particular one is built slightly differently than this one because this is actually meant for being a counterweight. So that's why it doesn't have a handle. When it's just these kind of two nunchuck style, that's because you put it on the end of a boom pole to counterweight whatever the light is on the other side. And when you're booming lights, safety first. Always sandbag your stands to keep your gear and your talent safe.
Yeah. I have a pro tip for that. I recently just experimented with buying used shot. So I assume it was shot that was actually shot out of a gun. I don't really know. But anyway, used shot that you can buy that's recycled, and they clean it and everything, and they ship it to you in a very dense
ginormous
box.
bag. Yeah.
And it really your delivery person is not going to appreciate you. But the upside is that it's way cheaper. Then you can buy the bags empty and buy the shot. The only downside is you have to buy in bulk. You have to buy quite a large quantity of shot at once. But the upside is then it's way cheaper per bag for an actual shot bag.
I own 600 pounds worth of sandbags that I have accumulated over the years because I buy some sandbags, I buy some more, I buy some more, I buy some more. Were I to just have the money and start out today, buying in bulk isn't such a terrible option.
So yeah, if you're starting out, you're listening to this because you're starting out, I would guess, then it's a good way to go. Look into bulk. I think it's generally called recycled shot, which is basically just they collected the shot somehow from wherever it's used. I assume in I don't know, like a shooting range or something, and then they wash it and they put it in a bag and they send it to you. So it works great. I just had that experience.
Yeah, I actually have one more sandbag. This is just a little like bean bag, and these are great for tabletop. Of just you put something down and you need to weigh it down. Just more of just weighing down things when you're shooting tabletop sets. But it's also nice when you kind of just you're setting something down and you need to lift it just a hint, just a little bit, and you can kind of just wedge the bean bag under there and get the right amount of leveling or height that you need out of it. So that's good. The last little piece of grip was we talked about stands. What's the difference between a cheap stand and an expensive stand? How many swear words do you use? That's essentially it. That is the difference. But I've got a cheap stand and an expensive stand here. So these are roughly the same age. I just want to point that out to you. One looks significantly worse condition. The green tape is because that knob doesn't hold anymore. So I put the green tape there to say this is last resort. Do not use that riser of the stand. So there's that. This knuckle that should be a handle, I need a Leatherman to ratchet that because it just snapped off because it was cheap, crappy plastic. Some of these tines are bent so they don't close quite right. Versus this one, exact same age, even though one is significantly bigger, this one's actually about the same or lighter weight. It's air cushioned, which means that when you have a sudden stop, it goes down slow. You can hear that going in. We'll do it for the podcast, people. That is the sound of air cushioning. That means your gear is safe when something comes loose and it goes crashing to the ground.
Photo equipment ASMR.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, so
this one's flat, like it.
So if you buy multiples
together
of these, they stack together, which is great for travel. You don't have a bag of stands; you just have a brick, and then you just peel one off the brick.
And much beefier, like knobs for adjusting the height. Yeah.
Yeah,
excellent.
so all in all, this is the stand that's going to come with whatever cheap, crappy kit you buy on Amazon, and then this is the stand you actually want to pay for. Never buy one of these. No. I own them because I keep getting them for free when I buy other stuff. So,
yeah, that should tell the story right there. Like, if it's coming for free with other equipment, it's probably not very good.
And then the last thing you absolutely need is cleaning gear. So lens pen. We've got a small blower. This one stays in my camera bag at all times. This one stays at my desk for when I'm doing more heavy duty stuff, just because it's bigger. But
the rocket ones are great. I have one too.
So, and then this one is just another one that I think I found at Goodwill or something. It's just got a tiny little squeaker, but it also has the brush on there. So, it always helps to just be able to wipe off your lens, be able to blow something out, and make sure you keep your gear clean. I just shot some landscape photos, and there's a big dust dot on it, and it's I'm sad now.
lens cloths too. I have so many of them all over the place, being a glasses wearer, but I use them for all sorts of stuff. And not even just like, not saying like go nuts and, scrub your lenses with them, but sometimes there's like just like a speck of dust and you want to like touch it with your finger. You don't like smear it and just like lightly hitting it with a lens cloth.
If you're shooting at 2.8, it might not be a big deal. But if once you start getting to that F7, F11, F16 range, you're gonna see it. You're gonna see everything.
Yep, not so good.
So yeah, those are all the little small, hopefully cheap knickknacks that you should have when you have a studio. All the other things you're gonna see on a podcast or a blog or something, like backdrops and stands and things. But like I got away with not having a backdrop for the longest time. I feel like these are the things that you absolutely need.
Yeah, these are the things that you need that are applicable to like any possible situation that you'd ever find yourself in. And sometimes more than one at once.
So at this point in the show, I have heard myself talking quite enough. We are going to throw it over. That's all of the physical stuff that you need. So Stuart, you put down some of the other kind of things that your studio should have.
I did. We've already covered one, which is quality stuff, or what I called quality stuff.
Oh,
and that is, as we pointed out, there are different tiers of gear, and some are very cheap and come for free with other stuff that you buy, and some you actually have to seek out and put the money down, and you will be very happy that you did long term. So definitely don't cheap out with anything, at least anything that's very critical. We are both, I think, very open to cheap gear, cheap but good gear. We're always kind of on the lookout for that stuff, but there's certain things where it's not, it's just not the same experience. It's not the same. You even looked at C-stands relatively recently, and looked at cheap C-stands versus expensive C-stands, and they can both get the job done, but the experience with something that's a little bit higher quality that is really, there's something to be said for that.
So when I was shooting my C-stand video, I did rate it of like, these are kind of best to worst, but honestly, everything except the very worst one, if someone gave it to me, I would use it. There are some there's like, this is a little more wobbly than I like, but you'll live. I think what you should do is, if it is something where having a bad version break on you would be catastrophic, whether that ends your shoot, whether that hurts your talent, whether that failing means that it breaks something else with it, like a stand going down breaks whatever is on that stand, then you buy the best one you can. If it's something where it can get the job done, but it's not going to be a catastrophic failure, it's just, that's not quite as good, then buy the cheap one. So like, I do that a lot with like lenses and kind of other things where it's like, it gets the job done. It's, it's pixel peeping. I'll buy the cheap gaff tape because at one point I wanted to do a video showing here's the difference, and they were identical. All gaff tape's the same, apparently.
Pretty much. Yeah, I see this a lot with tools, where people say, if you're going to use something, if you're going to do something once, then sure, go to Harbor Freight and buy, some, super cheap, terrible tool. If you end up breaking that tool because you're using it enough, then go and buy the expensive thing. And so maybe that's another approach that you can take, certainly for like the critical stuff, like this is going to hurt somebody, this is going to damage something, buy the good stuff from the beginning. But if you're like, I'm not sure, like, should I spend the money on this? Maybe buy the cheap one. You might be wasting your money longer term. I'd always encourage people to buy quality up front if you can. But if you're not sure, maybe that can get you by. And if you eventually break it, at that point, that you use it enough to justify the expense.
So, Stuart, just looking around the studio right now, what are some things I desperately need for my home studio?
Things you need for your home studio?
It's a mess, I will admit.
I would say
a segue.
Organization. I'm looking at the attempt at some organization over there.
It's an attempt.
So, you mentioned Adam Savage earlier, but this is something that I've always been very inspired by when I watch any of the stuff in his home workshop space, and that's that everything is organized. Yeah, sometimes it's messy, but there is organization available everywhere to help, one, encourage you to continue to be organized.
I think it's chaotic, not messy.
Well, yeah, it looks messy to somebody who's not familiar.
It looks messy, but everything is where it needs to be, and he knows where everything is.
Well, and it's ease of access. Like, I think this is a big one that is kind of ignored with a lot of organizations. Sure, you can put in a bunch of shelves and drawers and stuff and hide everything, and then it's impossible to use because you have to go and open a bunch of stuff to access anything. One of Adam Savage's big things that he talks about a lot is ease of access. Yeah, this, some rack that he built that has a bunch of I don't know, brushes sticking out of it looks kind of a little bit chaotic and weird and maybe messy to somebody that doesn't understand the philosophy. But the idea is you need any of those screwdrivers or brushes or tools or whatever, it's right there and you can just grab it and go. Instead of, oh, I need to like go into this drawer and rifle around and maybe it's over here and maybe it's over there. That ease of access is tremendously important, and I would arguably put that above just pure visual neatness. Like you need to be able to do your job well and quickly efficiently. And you can have the prettiest studio in the world, but if it's not a functional studio, then what's the point?
Yeah, the phrase that he uses specifically is called first level accessibility. And for example, and if you have cluttered kitchens and you go and there are those really deep cabinets and you say, oh, I need a thing, it's in the back of the cabinet. I need to pull out these three, items to be able to get to that. Then you think to yourself, you know what, never mind. I don't actually need it. I don't need my Vitamix today. I'm not pulling out all of those mugs to be able to get to it. It's the same idea in the studio. You're not going to use a thing that you can't access.
Yeah, definitely not. And one thing that you access a lot is electrical stuff, batteries,
all the time.
Things that need to be plugged in, things that need to be charged. As kind of an addendum to organization is some sort of charging area. And you have built one for yourself. So there's one
I'm working on it.
off screen that you can't see.
It's getting there. But
there's one in progress at least.
Yeah.
I am moving into a new space right now, and I haven't built anything complete, but one of the first things I did was I set up and I'm like, here's a shelf. This is where chargers is going to be. This is where I can charge these batteries. Here's where I can plug in this stuff. And it's got an actual space for that. And that is hugely valuable. It's so frustrating when you go to do something and you don't have charged batteries that you need. You don't have charged camera, charged device.
Or you can't find the charger.
Or you can't find it.
You are just scattering them around the house because those are where your outlets are. Yep. And then you forget to check so-and-so outlet and you leave batteries at home. That's the worst.
For sure.
All of your stuff should be in one spot that's quick to grab and go.
Yeah. And however you organize that, I feel like is up to you and how often you use the things that are in that setup. But charging spaces are good.
Absolutely. And so if you are a photographer, but specifically if you're a videographer, there are definitely extra concerns that photographers might not have. So if you're doing video, what's like, I know there's like a number one thing that you have to do if you're setting up a home studio and plan on doing video.
For charging or just in general?
It's called Segway. We're gonna practice this and get back to you.
Okay.
Sound treatments.
You were going. Yes, I understand, but I thought you were going in a different direction with that. But
it's your list.
Well, why don't we cut and then I will just respond to your statement. Yeah.
Okay.
The most important thing, as we've said, I think before on this show a couple times, is sound.
Absolutely.
The visuals of a video or film are secondary to the sound. If something has terrible sound, people will not watch it. If something has terrible video, I mean, maybe people won't watch it either, but if it has good sound, they're much more likely to do so.
Indeed.
So sound, sound treatment. This can be very complicated, unfortunately, and I'm not going to break down, the entire space of how you treat your room for sound, but the big thing that I'm going to tell you is don't just use egg crate foam like everybody seems to do. That's
really
not the way to go. No. So what egg crate foam can do is basically absorb sounds that are bouncing across the room, which certainly you want to reduce that. And so, you're going to use some egg crate foam in an eventual, sound treatment for sure. But the big thing that you probably need is actually killing sound from the outside of the room. Like that's the thing that really
earlier in this episode when the car with the muffler went by.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. So that is going to be a bigger problem often than unless you live in a cave that has nothing in the room to absorb any sound, you're likely going to have bigger problems with sound intruding from the outside than sound bouncing around on the inside, especially if you have any furniture, any soft furniture at all, that absorbs a ton of sound. So you're going to want to look into treating the room for deadening the outside sound. And usually that's something, some sort of layer, whether that's like in the wall, if you're super lucky and you're like building the studio as you're planning for it, and you can build something in the wall. There's this basically thick vinyl material that you can actually put behind wallboard that will just like kill any outside noise, which is really awesome. Sometimes that means putting up panels or treating your ceiling. A lot of sound can go through your ceiling, especially if you're in an area with a lot of like aircraft. So you really need like basically like high density foam or vinyl of some kind is what that ultimately means, covering almost the entire space.
So this room on a scale of 1 to 10.
I would say it's probably a 3 or a 4.
8. Well, that's a failing grade.
Because it doesn't reflect too much. And thankfully these, like the concrete absorbs quite a bit of noise, but yeah, it is what it is. You've got an insulated roof though, which is huge. This space, like the fact that you have insulation, granted that's for thermal reasons, but that absorbs a lot of sound by itself. So,
and I'm actually looking at a garage door right now, and I paid extra to get the garage door that had the extra sound barrier because I know that we're going to be doing stuff like this podcast.
Yeah, you can't necessarily fix every possible thing, and in the case of a garage door, it might be too unwieldy. It might be impossible due to the motion of the door to actually like stick anything onto it. So in this case, you just have to pay up and get a better door, basically. So yeah, you
put
will
some sound blankets up.
Sure. That's another thing you can do if you can't change your space at all, like trying to add blankets. And often, what I would recommend is if you can't change the space, but you can hang up blankets, try to do a double layer where you've got like a blanket and then like an inch or two and then another blanket up against the wall. That will basically trap sounds. Like sounds will go through one blanket and then hit the other and stay in that space, and then they won't go through. So it's not perfect. It's not a true replacement for any high density treatment, but it can work really well. Then you will need stuff to deal with reflections. Oftentimes you see stuff in the corners. Hard angles are not good for sound. Obviously the egg crate foam is for that kind of stuff. But yeah, stuff that actually treats intrusive noises, I think is going to be much more valuable than buying a bunch of that egg crate stuff that everybody seems to have and going with that. Not the best way to do it. It will help a little bit. You'll notice a difference and you'll think, oh, I treated the space for sound because it sounds so much better. Well, yeah, you're hearing that there's less echo, but you're still going to get annoying noises from the outside.
Yeah.
So think about that. Sound treatment is hard, unfortunately.
Another episode for a later day. We're going to have to listen to ourselves and write down all of these ideas we just had, and they will all come to you as future episodes one day. But that, I think, is a wrap for today.
But yeah, I would say that the last possible thing, and this is the biggest one of all, is space. If you are building, build bigger than you think you need. If you're buying, granted, we're in a seller's market, so that's a nightmare. Try to buy bigger than you think you need. You will always run out of space. Like people expand into space infinitely, no matter how big that space is. Infinitely.
I will say, if you have a choice between two spaces, even if one has slightly more square feet, go with the one with taller ceilings.
Yeah. For sure, because the ability to hang stuff and like put up lights, stuff. That's sweet.
whether it's the ability to hang, but even just thinking about something as simple as we mentioned earlier, I have a 7-foot umbrella. There were a lot of spaces I was looking at where if you walk into a space that has 8 or 9 foot ceilings, that umbrella doesn't start 7 feet at the ground. It starts like a foot off the ground because that's where the C-stand puts it, and then how the light reacts on your subject is the center of that 7 feet needs to be above the person's eye line. Otherwise, you are underlighting them like a Hitchcock movie. All of a sudden, guess what? You need to be 4 feet above your person's head. That means if you don't have 11-foot ceilings, you are scraping your ceiling. So that's just kind of what we mean of when I said earlier, the difference between cheap gear and expensive gear, curse words. Same thing with ceilings. Can you work with low ceilings? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a pain.
It's not fun.
The whole first year that I actually did online tutorials for YouTube, I had to be in a seated position.
Oh, boy.
Because I was in a basement and my ceilings were like 6.5 feet and I'm 6 feet tall. So I was like ducking and crouching to not hit it. And I had to sit down so that when I made a gesture, I don't hit the ceiling and wrap my knuckles. But
Yeah. So yeah, space. If you can start there, try to get bigger space, higher ceilings, whatever you can do, you will expand into it, guaranteed.
Absolutely.
And then you'll be like, man, I wish I got even more space than this. I thought I had plenty. I put all this stuff here and all of a sudden I don't have any more space.
Okay, I lied earlier. Now, that is a good place to wrap the episode.
Yes.
All right, so what are we talking about next time?
Well, we got some news stories, I think.
We do have some news
we got some news
stories.
stories, but there's a few things going on in the camera world that we feel like you need to know. They're certainly intriguing to us. Some more serious than others.
Awesome. So thank you guys so much for listening. And just a reminder for those of you listening, you can see our beautiful faces in the brand new studio on the YouTube channel. I'm also going to give a shout out to the Patreon, patreon.com/nomcreative. There's a $1 tip jar. You can just help us keep this show running.
Yep.
And listen for the outro for the email. Ba-dum-bum. If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, you can email us at hello@photo-op.show.
Watch us on Ben's YouTube channel at NomCreative.
As in om nom nom.
Share this with a friend, and you can listen to Photo Op anywhere podcasts are sold.
Or download it. 'Cause it's free.